okay, guys, here's the story. My business is slow right now. I need more work. And this is what I'm really concentrating on. This is what I do. If you know of anybody that might need this, could you do me a favor and put me in touch with them? Or if that's something that you think you might need, would you consider hiring me? Would you consider, let's have a chat? Maybe it's something I can do for you. And it was really funny because not only were people connecting me to others, but some of the people were saying, well, Greg, I didn't even know you did that. Like, oh, I know you had this podcast, but I didn't know were also a photographer, or I didn't know you did video work or whatever this other thing was. Like they would say, like, that's exactly what I need. Like I would have asked you if I had only known. And so I think that to me was just such a huge thing. And I'm sure I'll need to be reminded of this time and again, but actually asking for people for help and then telling people, doing a better job of explaining to people what I do out there in the world. I think that's something that I've got to continue to work on as well.
Well, I think about how vulnerable creative people need to really create wonderful work, but yet being vulnerable to have to go out and ask for help, especially I would imagine somebody as talented as you are in so many areas, to have to back up and say, help me here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it there, Charles. I mean, I think that, there's a part of our egos as creatives that says, well, how come people aren't just, my work is good, I think my work is good. I just don't understand why people aren't hiring me. What's wrong with me? It's sort of want to beat us up. It's sort of the ego talking, and it's, saying, well, there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong if people aren't hiring me, sort of turning it back on ourselves. Our egos have the tendency to do that sometimes. And so for me, I've been lucky to have tools that allow me to sort of let that voice is going to pop up once in a while, and for me to recognize, like, hey, that's not really the truth, and sort of let that sort of slide away.
Well, I think the irony, to me, as you say that, I think the pendulum seems to swing from, hey, I'm really good, I offer great value, and then it so quickly can swing to the imposter syndrome of, who am I? And what if they catch me? Can you relate? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, people would be lying. Every creative, if you've ever interviewed, they would be lying if they said that that's not ever happened to them before. I mean, I think it's part of the human condition. It's part of the human condition when we put ourselves out this comparisonitis or this imposter syndrome, feeling like, wow, who am I? Who am I to host a podcast? I don't have any letters behind my name. I wasn't I was fortunate enough. I had a background in radio years ago. I worked at a radio station, but it was a local, it was a station in St. Louis, Missouri. Anywhere else in the world, and that was years ago. No one's going to have a clue who I was or why on earth would I be talking on the radio, attempting to help people with advice on how to live a more purposeful life. How dare this guy do that?
Yeah, I get that. But see, you've worked in radio. I once had a radio. So,
Bada bing.
So who am I?
Bada bing.
Yeah, who am I to do a radio show or a podcast and be interviewing people? I'm a photographer.
Right.
I shouldn't be doing audio.
No, so. But I mean, I've been fortunate enough that that voice has popped up innumerable times in my life, and how I was able to deal with it, I would just sort of trudge ahead blindly anyway. I would just say, well, in the end, I need to do this for myself. There's something within me that's calling me to do this, and we're going to see what happens. I'm going to put this thing out there. I'm going to start throwing some photographs online. I didn't really start. I had a camera as a kid, and I took a photography class in high school, and I didn't. I was the guy that would take out the camera once a year on vacation when we would go on vacations. But it wasn't until about I guess it was 11 years ago, 2004. In my ill-fated short time in politics, the candidate I worked for basically said, like, hey, I need somebody to take some pictures on the campaign trail. You want to do that? Okay, great. I got a camera. I can start doing this. Like, hey, wow, these are pretty good, I think. Like, I think people might like these, and start putting some photos up here and there. And at some point, people started paying me to do it. and I learned about my craft. I went back to school, so to speak, online school, and workshops and classes, and tried to hone my craft. But I I've sort of taken that approach with every media, whether podcasting, with photography, with video, whatever.
I think people get so intimidated by a new craft without realizing that skills can be taught, but vision, heart, and the ability to understand narrative, less so. If one has vision, the skills can be learned. But it's a little bit, at least it seems to me, it's a little more difficult to help somebody grasp narrative or grasp vision and empathy.
Yeah, and the nice thing is, Charles, if you're working in one media and you have a grasp of the sort of fundamentals of that media, they're translatable to any other media, which is why sometimes you see people who are, really good in one media. You might know them as a photographer, or you might know them as, in some other media, and you find out, oh, they're also a painter, and they're actually a pretty good painter.
Right.
They're a musician and a photographer, or whatever. The combination of, people tend not to only work in one media, in one art, and you may only know their work in one art. But so many times creatives are working in multiple media because the fundamentals behind those are translatable. If you're able to frame something as a photographer, then you can use that vision as a videographer. I mean, obviously, there are a ton of peripheral skills you need to learn and you need to acquire to be a good videographer. But if you're used to framing something or looking at light in a certain way or how it's going to affect a scene, you can translate those across different media. And I think people forget that sometimes.
Well, it seems to me the two aspects of creativity that spread out are curiosity and the ability to make connections. Because whether you are a musician or a visual artist, that curiosity of continuing to learn, but also making connections, which happen in music, it happens in cooking, it happens in writing.
Yeah.
How to connect dots. And they don't always have to be in alignment to make those connections or pull them together. And that's something you seem to do well, is connect a lot of disparate dots together.
Well, thank you. I mean, I guess I see myself as, when I step back and try to look at, okay, what does Greg do? Which is a hard question for all of us to answer. When you describe people, what do you do? So I see myself as an arranger, not necessarily a composer. And I don't mean that to sort of take away from what I do, because I am composing in some way. But I think that what I do best is I take elements and I compose them in a new way. The elements are there.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And that can be applied to any media. So, whether that's a musical arrangement of a song and notes that I'm plucking away at a piano, or how to put a video together. I think the teaching point is to figure out what you're good at. Some people may be better composers than arrangers. They may be better creating this one original idea that pops up from time to time, and then handing those ideas off to maybe somebody else who's a good arranger, or collaborating with other people who do other aspects of what they do. And so sort of figuring out at a self-awareness, figuring out what you're good at, then saying, okay, well, I do this well, that this is how I can apply that to the work that I'm doing.
What do you think creative people need to succeed?
Creative people need to succeed, to conquer the fear, to get over ourselves, to get over the fact that we're scared to put our work out into the world. And that applies to every one of us. And there's not if you could ask, Bob Dylan probably, or, Salvador Dali, any famous artist in any medium, if they said we're not a little bit nervous about putting our art out into the world, I think they'd be lying. Nobody would say that. It doesn't matter how famous you are or how long you've done it or how many times you've done it. I think there's a trepidation when putting your work out into the world. And so we've got to find a way through that, because there are so many tremendously talented creatives who the world has not seen their work. The world hasn't heard their work because they haven't taken that step. They may be creating internally. They're creating that media in their home, in their office, in their garage, wherever that is. But it doesn't do the world any good if it's not out there. So it's a matter of somehow finding a way to push through that fear. And you can't necessarily conquer fear. It'll be there for you always at some level. But being able to find a way to push through the fear. And that's a concept that I learned from Jonathan Fields years ago. I remember he had a book where he wrote about that concept, about how he sort of leaned into fear, that he didn't try to banish it, didn't try to pretend it wasn't there, just sort of honored it. Like, you know what? The thing that I'm most scared to hit publish on is probably the best thing I've ever written. And I've heard a number of people on my show say that the thing that made them the most nervous to put out into the world, what are people going to think when I say this? What are people going to think when I publish this, when I put out this photograph, whatever that is? The more afraid you are, likely the better it is. And so finding a way to honor that, to recognize that, and then lean into that or sort of push through it. Okay, we're going to close our eyes and leap. Here we go. Go, go, launch. Okay, look, that didn't kill me. And it's muscle building. You're building this muscle. You're doing it. And so you do it once, okay, you get a little better at it. You do it 10 times. You're starting to build that muscle a little bit. You do it 150 times. Well, you've built up that muscle pretty good. It's not so hard anymore. You're still going to get a little nervous. You're still going to get a little, there's going to be trepidation or fear, but you've built that muscle up enough now that, okay, there's this crazy thing, but I'm just going to do it. I'm going to hit launch. I'm going to blow up the old show and I'm going to start the new show. And so I think I've been able to muscle build through some of those things. I think that that's just such a really crucial concept as well, is this notion of, I mean, it works in your brain that way. It's the plasticity of your brain. It's how your brain works.
I'm assuming the book you were talking about earlier that Jonathan Fields wrote was Uncertainty?
Yes, highly recommended.
Good. I just want to mention that, and we'll list that in the show notes as well for people to find. But yes, a very good book and very influential with me as well. And you've been dancing all around this question for me, so I want you to dig into some specifics, if you can, on systems and processes that you use to put in place to not only improve your time and energy, but to get your work shipped. I mean, we're both, as I remember, also fans of the work of Seth Godin.
Yeah,
and
just ship it.
just ship that work. But you've got to have processes in place to do that consistently. Can you talk about your approach, your processes, your thinking to consistently do that in so many different areas?
Sure, Charles. Well, I struggle with it, to be honest with you. It's arguably my biggest struggle as a creative.
No doubt, which is why I bring it up.
Absolutely. And so for me, I've tried a number of different things, and it's an evolving, ongoing process. So I find that regularity is key for me. I mean, one of the things that I did on my previous podcast, for instance, I was on a network, on the Blog Talk Radio network. And so one of the appeals of that system for me was I did it as a live show. It was a live broadcast, and it was every Monday night from 6 to 7 p.m. And so I knew every Monday, Monday afternoon's going to come. It's going to be show prep time. You're going to prep for your interview. You're going to block off this amount of time. 6 o'clock comes. You're going live. You're on the air for an hour. You're going to do a little promotion after the show. And I had it blocked off, and it was regular. And so when you get into, for me, habit building is about regularity. And so if I knew that that was every week, boom, 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 Mondays, it just made it so much easier for me. And it's been something I've struggled a little bit with the new show is I don't have a set day. I tend to put out the new episodes in midweek because I'm pre-taping and I'm just sort of launching them out in the world, and I start promoting them once they're up on the web, once I have the page built for that episode on my website. And so I think it would behoove me long term to decide, okay, Greg, you're going to launch new episodes now on Wednesday mornings, for instance. I think I need that system in place, that regularity. So for me, habits are always about systems. For me, the also crucial point is doing the important stuff earlier than later. And so I have a morning routine that's chunked out. It's about 2 hours long in total from the time I roll out of bed until the time I start to do actual work. And I've struggled for years to build such a routine, but the key for me was having it be first thing in the morning and doing the same thing every day. So I roll out of bed, I take a shower. As soon as I get out of the shower, I meditate 20 minutes a day. Then I do a series of exercises to strengthen my back. I've struggled with back issues for years. So 15, 20 minutes of the exercises. I go take a walk. As soon as I'm done with that, I go out for my walk. It's sort of a mindfulness exercise for me. It gets me physical exercise. I'm taking a photograph, which I then post online every morning. I try to post. So it's something of a photographic exercise for me. I get to be a little bit creative. It's a little bit mindfulness. It's exercise all rolled into one. Come back.
And may I interrupt to say, I look forward to seeing that each day on Facebook.
Well, thank you.
Because it is not only an evidence of that practice, but it's something to share with other people. And they're stimulating. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Carry on.
I will. I don't plan on stopping that practice. And then I come back and eat breakfast and check emails, and so I don't go on email. I don't do Facebook or anything before